Welcome back to the Conservative Cat Show, where the truth isn't just told, it's declawed from propaganda, and it is served up hot, and it is served fresh, and it is served with a helping of common sense. Yes, today we've got the truth. I'm your host, Conservative Cat, and we are stepping into one hot mess this morning. It's tangled, it's messy, and it's really tragic, and it's really making my whiskers twitch with outrage. It's this whole DCFS story. Now, it's kind of explosive. I was reading it in the Center Square this morning, and apparently DCFS has been accused of letting uncertified interns tear kids from homes. So we're talking interns, not child protection service, CPS specialists. We're talking interns being uncertified. We're going to dig into it. Of course, DCFS is denying that, but there's a state lawmaker who says he has documentation. So we're going to get to all of that. Plus, I do want to get to Trump. A lot has been going on in the news this week. I love weeks like this when there's tons of content and stuff in the news. It's kind of sad that Illinois has gotten such like a national spotlight. It's kind of embarrassing. But Trump has blasted Governor J.B. Pritzker as, quote, grossly incompetent. And now Donald Trump is threatening to bring the National Guard into Chicago to deal with the crime crisis that's there. Governor J.B. Pritzker also has kind of been caught between this rock and a hard place. And he was on NBC, and we didn't get to this yesterday, but he was also asked about Mamdani comments in New York. He's trying to be the New York mayor. But Mamdani, he made like comments about how billionaires shouldn't be allowed in the Democrat Party, being that this is such a time of inequality or whatever. So Pritzker was asked about that, and his answer really got him stuck in like this game of Billionaire Twister where he was like trying to squeeze his way out of it, but he wound up like in a pretzel over Mamdani's comments. So we're going to get to all of it here. Be sure to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button right now. Tell your friends to go subscribe. And be sure to head on over to patriotpumpenergy.com. Grab your bottle of pre-workout. It's right behind me on the shelf here. You can see it. You can use promo code ConservativeCat. $10 off at checkout. That is the best promo code out there. It's a pre-workout, premium pre-workout. It's a great energy drink alternative. We don't load you up with caffeine and sugar to try to get you addicted. There's other ingredients in there that keep the energy and give you long-lasting energy. All right, let's get into Illinois politics. Now, in Illinois politics, we know incompetence is practically a job qualification. And like I said, the nonprofit sector, this is really fascinating. They prey on people who, I mean, how do I put this lightly, are retarded. And I mean that in the most serious sense of the word. So I've noticed, especially when they go and lobby, that they are people who tend to be impoverished, borderline homeless, borderline mentally retarded, mentally ill people that they prey on to get into these nonprofit organizations. And then they go lobby Springfield, and then they ultimately wind up like as government employees because these nonprofits are propped up with your tax dollars. Okay, so incompetence is practically a job qualification. Okay, but when we're talking about breaking up families, when we're talking about a state agency, like whatever, I hate it that nonprofit organizations are getting taxpayer dollars, and a lot of these nonprofit organizations, like the criminal justice reform organizations in Chicago, a lot of them have these mentally ill people or retarded people, borderline retarded, and I mean that in the most serious sense of the word, going to go lobby your legislators, and they're getting paid with taxpayer dollars to go do it. Like, that bothers me. It makes my whiskers twitch. But this makes me outraged what's going on with DCFS, because it's not only bad governance, but it's political failure, it's moral failure. And as a Christian, as conservatives, and if you're watching this program, you're likely a Christian conservative, we actually care about the sanctity of family. And I can't sit quietly by when they play with the lives of children and they tear children from their families. So I can't do it. And this should outrage you, this story. So let's break it down with what we know so far. Now, this is according to the Center Square. The state representative, Jed Davis, a Republican, says he has documentation showing that DCFS used interns who were not fully certified under Illinois law to investigate child abuse cases. Now, there's a big difference between observing, shadowing, being like not necessarily a caseworker, but being like a liaison. They have those in the foster care system. Somebody who deals with communication. Okay, we're not talking about those people. We're talking about people who actually investigate and make the decision to tear the child from the home. Okay, those people under the law have to be fully certified and licensed. And in some cases, these investigations have led, according to Jed Davis, to kids being removed from their home. So these investigations conducted by interns have led to the removal of kids from homes. And apparently, according to documentation he has, if true, right? I'm being very careful here. According to that documentation, those interns are not fully certified under Illinois law. Now, here's the important part. Illinois law, as Davis points out, it clearly requires both a license and a certification to conduct child abuse investigations. Okay. So Davis says that these interns only had one piece of that puzzle, which is the license. But to quote him, he says, quote, "This has led to a child being removed from a home who shouldn't have been removed from a home, because the person who removed the child from the home only met like half the requirement." Okay, the licensure part of this, not the certification part of this. So if true, this is very illegal. It's not just illegal, but it's immoral. And it's a direct assault on due process for the parents and for the children. And I know before anybody says in the comment section, "Oh, Kat, this is just partisan politics again." Remember, Jed Davis, the guy who's made a fuss about this and talks about the documentation showing that these interns didn't have part 2 of the 2-part law, license and certification. They didn't have the certification. He's a foster parent, and I know a thing or two about the foster system. Very close family member of mine. My mother, I've talked about it before, is fostering a child, so I've gotten an up close and personal look into the foster system. He has seen it from the inside, so he's not just tossing grenades for a headline. I'm not tossing grenades for a headline. That's not what we do here. I'm coming at this looking on the inside, and then also Davis is looking at this from the inside. So we have to keep that in mind as well. So DCFS, of course, is denying it all. They are denying it all. They put out a statement saying that Davis has both the law and the facts wrong. Insert bureaucratic explanation here. Okay, so they claim that every investigator is qualified and certified under something called the Child Protective Investigator and Child Welfare Specialist Certification Act of 1987. Okay, so they cite a different law and they say, "Oh, well, they're certified under that law." Well, here's where the rub is, and here's where it gets bureaucratic a little bit. I'll translate this into English. DCFS, they love to play, with their alphabet soup and with these like other laws. However, the law doesn't require that only people with the job title child protection specialist do the work. Okay, it says that interns can do it as well and do the work as well, as long as they go through DCFS's internal training and pass the right exams. Okay, so they can do the work as well if they're interns. So basically what DCFS is saying, "Don't worry, we do our own homework." Okay, so they said, "Oh, well, they're covered under the Child Protective Investigator, Child Welfare Specialist Certification Act." But they're not, because they're interns. So they don't fall under that provision in the law. The way I'm looking at this, and I'm not an attorney or a law expert, I would say, but I'm just somebody with two eyes and reading comprehension, okay? The way I look at this, Child Protective Investigator, Child Welfare Specialist Certification Act is for the child protection specialist. Okay, but these people do not have that job title, but yet they can still do the work of investigations and tearing children from their families, okay? They can still do that type of work, okay, and taking children away from families. Not that it's not warranted in some cases. Some cases it's totally warranted to take children away from their families. But this is a really important job of the state to decide whether a child is taken from their family and to tear a child away from their family. That's a very important job, and it's a lot of power. Okay. So the interns can do that job, and I don't think that they're covered, obviously, under the Child Protective Investigator or Child Welfare Specialist Certification Act. And they still are able to do the job, because as long as they go through the internal training and they take all the right exams, they can still do the investigator job and make the decision to tear the child away from the home. So like I said, basically DCF is saying that, hey, don't worry, we checked our homework, but when you question them on it, they just point you back to the homework that they graded themselves. Okay, so nothing says trustworthy like the government agency, DCFS, marking its own test with a gold star. Okay, that's essentially what's going on here. They're marking their own test with a gold star with an A+. So they just are saying, trust us, essentially. Now, here's where it gets more interesting. Davis says that they're supposed to meet with DCFS, but he canceled because, so like I said, Davis is a part of the foster care system. He has an inside look, and he was supposed to meet with DCFS, but he canceled because they refused to let him bring in other relevant parties. And he called that the definition of an unbalanced and inefficient conversation. So let me translate that for you. DCFS, they wanted to bring the whole squad to defend themselves and to have their whole squad, but they told Davis, sorry, you can't bring your own experts, you can't bring your people, and really this is like playing a game of football where there's 11 players against one. Okay, so he should have been allowed to have the relevant parties with him at this supposed meeting that he was supposed to meet with DCFS. Now, here's the smoking gun. Davis, he filed a FOIA. This is the Freedom of Information Act request, and the documents came back showing exactly what he's talking about. On DCFS letterhead, they confirmed that the person who investigated a local case was indeed an intern. Okay, and when asked if she was certified, DCF said, no, she's not. Friends, I think that's really it. That's the bombshell here. That's the ball game. You can try to spin it. You can try to release these press releases. You can try to throw out your fancy legalese or your fancy legal interpretations. But the documents show, hey, she's not certified, and you all admitted it. And remember, this isn't a paperwork technicality, okay? We're talking about the authority to take a child away from a home. This is one of the most invasive, most important, most irreversible powers that the state has. And if you don't have the legal authority to do it, and if you don't meet the legal definition in order to do that, and you did it anyway, that's not an oopsie, like, oops, we messed up. That is a violation of your rights and a violation of due process. And, you know, if this were the only scandal at DCFS, I would chalk it up to just bad management. And, hey, maybe it's a one-off. But, folks, it's not. Within the last month, we saw the Illinois Auditor General report. I did a story on this a couple of weeks ago. You guys can go check it out in the archives. I talked about this. There was a report showing that 29 out of the 34 problems at DCFS are repeat failures. repeat findings from the previous years. So, Kat, what does that mean? Dumb that down for me. It means that they've been told, hey, this is the mistakes you're making. These are the mistakes you are making. This is what's broken with DCFS. We want you to fix it. And then they never fix it. So Republican State Representative Tom Weber pointed out that these kids have died on DCFS's radar. If you go to Center Square, there's an article there. You can read his quotes. But this isn't really about politics, okay? This is an agency that has a core mission. And let me be blunt. If you were to run your household the way DCFS is running their agency, the way these state employees are running that agency, the state would take away your kids. Okay, this is gross incompetence. They have a core mission and they're failing at that mission. So from a Christian perspective, this really bothers me because we know as Christians that family is foundational. That is an institution God created. It's sacred and it's under constant attack, whether it be from culture, bad policy, bureaucratic incompetence, public schooling. Okay, it's under constant attack, the family institution. When the state gets it wrong, it's not just an oops, it's an injustice. Okay, and in Proverbs 31:8, it tells us, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of those who are destitute. Okay, so that applies to children, but it also applies to parents wrongfully accused and stripped of their rights. So we need to speak up for people who can't speak for themselves, children. Proverbs 31:8 demands us to do that. And, the state is getting it wrong. They shouldn't be having unqualified people taking children away from families. And of course, they're going to deny that. And I don't know. I didn't see the primary documentation. I'm going off of the report of Jed Davis and the documentation that he has. And being that he has an inside look, I don't think that he's just throwing out grenades for headlines, okay? I think that he truly sees on a day-to-day basis, being a foster parent himself, the incompetencies of DCFS. So the government should be a servant of justice, not a destroyer of families. And I want to recap this story for you before we move on and go to a couple more stories that I have planned this morning. Illinois DCFS, what they said essentially was, we follow the law. The FOIA says, well, you don't. And you admitted that there was an intern who took a child away from a family and that she wasn't certified. DCFS says, well, we have a great intern program and they're covered under this act that they really aren't covered under, from what I understand, the Act 1987 Act. They said, oh, well, we have a great intern program. And parents are saying, why is an intern taking away my kid? It really should be somebody who's licensed and certified and is actually covered under that 1987 Act. So this is the Illinois government way. If you don't succeed at first, redefine success. So you start to see these state agencies when they're caught or when they're embroiled in scandal, you start to see them start to redefine things with legalese and their own legal interpretations. And they redefine the words intern, right? And I'm not falling for it. You shouldn't fall for it. And here's where we stand. DCFS has enormous power and has a history of failure. Bottom line. And when we elect officials who shine light on that, they get stonewalled or they get told that they're liars, in the case of Jed Davis here. And what needs to happen now is we need legislative oversight. This documentation is huge. This is big news. There needs to now be a full investigation into the uncertified investigations, into the interns who actually went and conducted investigations and took children away from families. Those interns need to be checked to see if they actually went through a certification process, and if they were uncertified, there needs to be a complete overhaul of those decisions and they need to be reevaluated. So the commitment should be to protect both the child's welfare and the family's rights. Okay, that should be the state agency's commitment. Okay, I've got to take a quick break, but we are going to come back, and I want to talk about two political heavyweights. So actually, it's kind of funny. I have a liberal acquaintance, I should say, that I still keep on social media because it's hilarious to watch their social media post. And after, the press conference, Governor or JB Pritzker, he was under fire. Donald Trump took some shots. I think he called him like Big JB or something like that. And, the media spun it as if he was like making fun of his weight, which, I mean, when I listened to the comments, that's not really what I heard. He just called him Big JB, maybe like a small little jab at his weight. And people were saying, oh, Donald Trump is like way bigger than JB, which I'm just like, on what planet? Like, what planet do you live on? Okay. A lot of these libs. So I had a liberal best friend who posted, Donald Trump should keep his mouth shut. At least I see, Governor JB Pritzker walking Michigan Avenue in Chicago, which he was actually caught walking around Michigan Avenue on camera. The infamous photo. I'll have to pull it up. His legs look really rough. Like he's got no circulation to his legs. It's really quite sad. He's got they're almost purple. Some varicose veins. Kudos to Governor JB Pritzker if he is in fact exercising. I applaud anybody who exercises. It's tough to do. It's not easy. It takes dedication, commitment, no matter your size, right? So I applaud anybody who gets in the gym, anybody who walks, anybody who tries to better their life. That's great. But somebody had posted that Donald Trump just sits around and drinks Diet Coke. Okay, number one, Donald Trump is like 6'3", and I think I looked it up. He's like 220 pounds, something like that, at 6'3". Governor JB Pritzker, and these are just estimates on, online. I mean, I'm not their doctors, right? Donald Trump's is definitely far more accurate because he did release his physical. Guy's in better shape than I am, by the way. Donald J. Trump is in better shape than I am. His resting heart rate is at like 62 beats per minute, which is wild. That's a really nice heart rate. I've been trying to get back into the 60s for quite some time. But Donald Trump, 6'3", 220 pounds. Okay. Now, according to the interwebs, Governor JB Pritzker is about 5'9". And I'm going to say that with an eye twitch because I'm 5'7", and I've been in press conferences with JB, asked him questions. He seems a little shorter than me. Now, I don't know if that's because I was wearing a little bit of a wedge, but I'm 5'7". We'll go with the interwebs. We'll call him 5'9". Okay, Governor JB Pritzker, and he weighs in at 270 pounds. Okay, according to the interwebs, and estimates online. So that is a big difference. A 6'3", 220, and then you've got a 5'9", 270. That's a big difference. Okay, and Donald Trump doesn't drink Diet Coke all day. He's on the golf course constantly, which is exercise. If you golf, you know that. So I want to get to these two political heavyweights. They are pretty heavy. I mean, I will say 220 pounds. That is no, and 6'3", that is no lightweight. Okay. And 270 pounds, 5'9". They're both heavyweights, right? Political heavyweights. That is true as well. And I will say, I will be the first to say that Governor JB Pritzker, smart, very smart, politically cunning, knows what he's doing. Definitely not a Kamala Harris. Okay. He knows what he's doing. Okay. He's destroyed the state, and that was his intention when he was elected. Okay. It's clear by the maps that he signed, the gerrymandered maps he signed into law. It's clear by the Protect Illinois Communities Act. It's clear by the Safety Act. It's clear by the removal of parental notification, where 12-year-olds can now go get abortions without their parents' consent. I mean, the destruction of the state is his goal, It's a race to destroy the state and to destroy the taxpayer and uplift the public sector. We have more units of government than anybody in the nation. Our state lawmakers are some of the highest paid state lawmakers in the nation. We have many, many forms of government. So it's all about robbing the taxpayer to lift up the public sector. And here's why Governor J.B. Pritzker does this, in my opinion. It's because he's so bitter. Donald Trump talked about this, actually, that, he called Governor J.B. Pritzker a complete disaster, or an grossly incompetent. And then he said Chicago is a disaster. And he said that he's going to be possibly sending the National Guard. But Donald Trump also talked about how Governor J.B. Pritzker was ousted from the family business, the Hyatt Hotel business. And then he became governor and went to the public sector. I think that he honestly hates private sector folks. There is a disdain that public sector folks have for private sector folks. It's because they can actually make a product and sell it, and people want it. Now, don't get me wrong, the Hyatt Hotel enterprise is huge and is very successful, much like the Donald Trump real estate empire is very successful, and the hotels are very successful. But Donald Trump knows this guy. He knows the business. They're kind of in the same business, almost competitors, almost in the private sector. He knows that Governor J.B. Pritzker, at least this is what Donald Trump said, he was kicked out of the family business, and then he went into the public sector. And I think there's such a distaste in his mouth over that he robs the people in the private sector as almost a form of revenge, and he props up the public sector. There's a fundamental difference between somebody who works in the private sector and then somebody who works in the public sector. The public sector, they tend to be those get-rich-quick folks. We've talked about that. People in the private sector have the biblical foundation where, hey, I have to put my head down, work hard, and I will gradually build my wealth enough to where I can leave an inheritance to my children. So that is the biblical idea of wealth and wealth gaining. In the public sector, they don't hold those beliefs. So we're going to get to these two heavyweights, political heavyweights, because they were throwing verbal haymakers. And the city of Chicago is caught in the middle here. And I want to talk about how Donald Trump is seeking now at this point to end no cash bail policies across the state at a national level, which is going to be huge for Illinois if that actually happens. I'll be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Hey, good morning. Smash that like button and share this out with your friends. Smash that like button right now. I know you're watching. That would really help me out, folks. And if you're not subscribed, what the hell are you doing? Make sure you subscribe and share this out with a friend. Tell them about Conservative Cat. Golf is exercise when you don't use a cart. Yeah. And when you don't drink 4 cases of beer while out on the golf course. You're kind of losing the value of the exercise if you are pounding, Busch lattes. We all lie about our weight. Yeah. So like I said, those are rough estimates according to the interwebs. Pritzker is weighing in at 270, and then you have Donald Trump who weighs in at about 220. Now, being that this was a physical by a White House doctor, and the data points on Donald Trump are probably more accurate than that of the data points on Governor J.B. Pritzker, because he actually got a physical. But I don't know. Those are rough estimates. Okay, I have no idea how much these guys weigh because I'm not their doctor. We're just going off of rough estimates, and the only reason why I brought it up is because the left is out there saying that Donald Trump weighs more than Governor J.B. Pritzker, which anybody with two eyes knows that that's not true. However, I will point out that Governor J.B. Pritzker has definitely been losing weight. Quote from Jay Lopez. He knows he must compete on stage with Governor Gavin Newsom in 2028, and he needs to look better. Yes, at least Governor J.B. Pritzker is looking a lot better. I will say that, and I'm glad. Anybody who takes their health seriously, changes their life for the better, whether that be in a physical sense or a spiritual sense, that is to be applauded. So, will Governor J.B. Pritzker be president? Absolutely not, because the establishment wants a useful idiot in there, and Governor J.B. Pritzker is smart. He's politically cunning, and he knows what he's doing, and the establishment will never pick him because he's not a Jasmine Crockett. He's not an AOC. He's not a Kamala Harris, and he's not a Joe Biden. He's too ambitious, and he is a threat to the establishment. They will never allow him to become the Democrat nominee. Okay, so let's talk about Donald Trump's comments yesterday. He wants to reverse Donald Trump, Illinois' end of cash bail. This is a radical policy shift. I've talked about it a lot here on the program. But this policy shift has been wreaking havoc on our state since 2023. Okay. Wreaking havoc on our state, in our streets. It is a really it is a crappy policy. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. The ending of cash bail. Pritzker, of course, responded to Donald Trump. Governor J.B. Pritzker responded to Donald Trump, and he called him, convicted felon. He's a cheater, and he insisted that the city of Chicago is fine. Friends, our leaders are throwing insults at each other, and they're dodging them like dodgeballs at recess. And I'm upset because I feel like we're never going to get a serious solution. Now, the only person who's talking about policy and solutions to this is Donald Trump. Pritzker, of course, responded to Donald Trump and just did a bunch of name calling. Now, this is about whether Chicago will finally get real action and whether law and order is going to be restored. Okay, well, whether or not Chicago sees real action and whether or not law and order is going to be restored, and whether or not we're going to keep being in this vicious cycle of crime, catch, release, repeat, crime, catch, release, repeat. This is a vicious cycle that the city of Chicago is in, but not only the city of Chicago, but everywhere in Illinois, because the Safety Act is a state law, and it's affecting even your rural communities. Okay, so let's start with Donald Trump. Okay, at a press conference in D.C., he made it clear if Chicago doesn't act or doesn't get its act together, he's willing to send in the National Guard. And not just for show. He would send in the National Guard and he would try to restore the peace. Okay, and he wants to restore peace in a city where lawlessness has become pretty much background noise. I visited Chicago not that long ago. Every 5 seconds, there's an ambulance. Every 5 seconds, there's like wee woo, wee woo, wee woo. So it's very sad. If you were to visit the city of Chicago, there's a lot of crime. There's a lot of homelessness. It's a mess, and it's a really pretty city, which is really what's like super sad, because it's a really pretty city. All right, so Trump said, quote, "We have a mayor who's totally incompetent. He's an incompetent man, and we have an incompetent governor." That's Pritzker. Pritzker's incompetent. His family threw him out of the business, and then he ran for governor. Okay, so that kind of tracks with what I was saying about how Governor J.B. Pritzker, I think, is seeking revenge on the private sector because of being kicked out of his family business. Donald Trump said he was kicked out of his family business. I don't know the drama behind that, like the ins and outs of all that drama of his family and how he's not really in the family business. He's the Hyatt Hotel empire. The Hyatt hotels are really, really nice, and they do really well. Donald Trump would probably know better than anybody the family drama and the story there. So Donald Trump came out and said, and Pritzker, when he responded to this, all he said was that Donald Trump was a cheater and that he was a convicted felon, and he insisted that the city was fine. He didn't say anything really about his family throwing him out of the business. He didn't deny any of that when he responded, okay? So Donald Trump isn't tiptoeing around his opinions. He's got pretty strong opinions, Donald Trump here. And if you've been paying attention to Chicago crime stats, the smash and grabs, the carjackings, the shootings, it's not like he's pulling his opinions out of thin air. And it's not like he's, wrong for forming these opinions, okay? Because it tracks with the math, okay? His opinion tracks with the math, Donald Trump's opinion. Now, Trump isn't just talking about Chicago, but he's talking about reversing the no cash bail law in the state. Okay, would be huge, and he's talking about doing this at a national level for all forms of government, all state forms, or all state laws that eliminated cash bail. There's some other states. We were the first state, I think, in 2023 to move towards this policy of no cash bail. And the one that says someone, this is the one law that says that someone can go out, commit a crime, a violent crime at that, in the morning, and then they can be home by dinner time. Okay, that's the crux of the law. That's what this law is all about. Now, I do want to play this press conference. Take a listen. Oh, here we go. Let me make sure that you can hear it. That would be helpful.
In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly.
The second major executive action that President Trump signed was a presidential memorandum directing the Secretary of Defense to utilize the National Guard to address the conditions we see on our streets here in D.C. It also authorized the Secretary of Defense to work with state governors to utilize their National Guard units if necessary as well.
There is a law on the books confirmed by the Constitution called posse comitatus. And it means that the federal government does not have a right to send soldiers into American cities for the purpose of, well, for any purpose really, but specifically to fight crime, let's say. And that is what he's suggesting that he will do, violate that law. It's not surprising to me that he suggests violating the law. He's done it many times and been convicted of it 34 times. And so I would just say he has absolutely no right and no legal ability to send troops in to the city of Chicago. And so I reject that notion.
But then I'm going to look at New York in a little while. Let's do this. Let's do this together. Let's see. It's going to go pretty quickly. And if we need to, we're going to do the same thing in Chicago, which is a disaster. We have a mayor there who's totally incompetent. He's an incompetent man. And we have an incompetent governor there. Pritzker's an incompetent. His family threw him out of the business, and he ran for governor. And now I understand he wants to be president. But I noticed he lost a little weight, so maybe he has a chance. You never know what happens. But Pritzker's a gross incompetent guy, thrown out of the family business.
As to everything else that he had to say this morning, I guess I should say thank you for the compliment. And you have to remember that I reject criticism and don't really want to respond to criticism from Donald Trump, who inherited his money and then went bankrupt 6 times and then defrauded his business partners. And by the way, he cheats at golf too. So look, I believe that, I have had a successful business career. I know that. And I chose to run for governor because I believed that our state was headed in the wrong direction. And we have righted the ship. We have a lot more work to do, but we've done a whole lot to make sure that we're keeping people safe and improving people's income levels and attracting business to the state. And by the way, we've balanced the budget 7 times in a row, and we've raised the minimum wage. And we have a whole lot more work to do, no doubt about it. But I think my intentions are clear. And unlike the president, I'm not trying to make money off of my public position.
This dire public safety crisis stems directly from the abject failures of the city's local leadership. The radical left city council adopted no cash bail. By the way, every place in the country where you have no cash bail is a disaster. That's what started the problem in New York, and they don't change it. They don't want to change it. That's what started it in Chicago. I mean, bad politicians started it, bad leadership started it, but that was the one thing that's central: no cash bail. Somebody murders somebody and they're out on no cash bail before the day is out. We're going to end that in Chicago. We're going to change the statute. I spoke with Pam and Todd and everybody. We're going to change the statute, and I'm going to have to get the Republicans to vote because the Democrats are weak on crime, totally weak on crime. They don't know why. They want to stop because they get mugged too. But we're going to change no cash bail. We're going to change the statute and get rid of some of the other things. And we'll count on the Republicans in Congress and Senate to vote. We have the majority, so we'll vote.
Okay. So, break some things down there. He didn't really address the whole, like, his family kicking him out of the business. He didn't deny that. He said that he just wasn't going to address the criticisms, but that he chose to run for governor. I think that Governor J.B. Pritzker did not choose to run for governor. He was kicked out of his family's business and they threw him out. And then I think that he has a complete and utter disdain for people in the private sector and people who are successful in the private sector, which is why he's run the state the way he has, where he sucks the taxpayer dry. We now have the highest property taxes in the nation. Everything he says there, balancing budgets. Yeah, you can balance a budget if you raise the taxes on the people, okay? Your budget has ballooned from $30 billion to $55 billion there, JB, since you've taken office, which is complete and utter insanity. Now, I do want to address something that Governor J.B. Pritzker said because he's wrong. And I want to address the elephant in the room. Can the president actually send the National Guard into the city without the governor's blessing? Yes, technically, yes. Under a federal authority, like using the Insurrection Act, it's rare, sure. But it's false and it's wrong to say that he doesn't have the federal authority to do that. He can use the Insurrection Act, and you can use it when local leadership, Brandon Johnson, Governor J.B. Pritzker, refuse to maintain public safety. Here's the thing. If Chicago is spiraling into chaos, which it is, we know the carjackings, the smash and grabs, the violent shootings, okay, we know the crime statistics, okay? If Chicago is spiraling into chaos and the governor and the mayor are too politically stubborn to act, you best believe that the president, whether you like him or not, is going to look for ways to protect the citizenry, okay? From a Christian worldview, let's look at the Bible, basic instructions before leaving Earth. Okay, so it's the God-given responsibility to government to punish evil and to protect the innocent. Look up Romans 13 for me, okay? If the leaders can't or won't, in this case, protect the innocent and punish evildoers, they have abandoned their mandate in Romans 13. Okay, so like I said, the Democrats are just anti-Christians. This is why they introduce things like policies like the no cash bail, ending cash bail here in the state of Illinois. That's why they introduce these things, because anything that they can do to just be anti-biblical, Romans 13, commands the government to punish evil and to protect the innocent. That's exactly the opposite of what the Safety Act does, okay, in the state of Illinois, the so-called Safety Act. It protects the criminals, the evildoers, and it punishes the innocent. It punishes the victims. So Pritzker didn't exactly hold back. I wouldn't say he held back, but he did not address the direct criticism of him getting kicked out of his family business. He said that he wouldn't. Now, clearly he took it personal because Governor J.B. Pritzker went straight to the personal attacks of President Donald Trump. And I think it's so funny that the left came out. They were like, oh, Donald Trump is poking fun at J.B. Pritzker's weight, which he didn't. He actually gave Governor J.B. Pritzker a compliment. Just so funny how those headlines read, like, how dare President Donald Trump attack a man's weight, fat shaming Donald Trump, whatever. He actually gave the guy a compliment, and Governor J.B. Pritzker acknowledged the compliment. Pritzker didn't return the favor of giving Donald Trump a compliment. He called Donald Trump a cheater, a convicted felon, pointed to his bankruptcies, which happens in business, by the way. That isn't indicative of failure. Getting kicked out of your family's own business, now that takes a lot of screwing up, I would say, because it's family. But he took everything really personal. He didn't make anything about policy. He just said that Donald Trump can't do it, which I pointed out was wrong. He can invoke the Insurrection Act, and the local government is not meeting their mandate. The mandate, which is actually laid out in Romans 13 in the Bible, to protect the innocent and to punish evildoers. If they're not meeting that mandate, then of course the federal government's going to step in. But Pritzker didn't address the substance of Donald Trump's criticisms about crime, about the public safety, about the Safety Act, no cash bail. He didn't really even address the substance of the policy. He just went for straight character attacks on Donald Trump. Made a jab at him about how he cheats at golf, because it's easier than defending the indefensible. You see, that's why he didn't bring up, the Safety Act, no cash bail. This actually, there are Democrat talking points about why they love the Safety Act. Okay, they love saying that it's social justice, and people who can't afford bail. It was leading to mass incarceration of innocent people, the cash bail, and they weren't able to get out on bail. Poor people, it disproportionately affected poor people. There are Democrat talking points as to why, they were proponents of the Safety Act. He didn't pull out any of those because really, you throw out those. I mean, you are defending the indefensible. So he stayed away from those, and he just relied on the character attacks. So friends, that's Illinois politics in a nutshell. Don't fix the problem, just insult the person pointing out the problem. So that's exactly what Governor J.B. Pritzker was doing there. He was just insulting the person pointing out the problem. So here's where the rubber meets the road. Illinois became the first state to abolish cash bail in 2023 under the so-called Pretrial Fairness Act, the Safety Act. And the pitch was that, hey, let's help poor defendants who can't afford bail, and let's reduce mass incarceration. Okay, that is the Democrat talking point. The reality of this policy, what we are seeing is violent criminals who are released in the same day that they are arrested. They are arrested in the morning, and they are released by dinner time. Okay, judges have less discretion, less say. The victims, they are constantly living in fear, thinking that their attacker might be back in the neighborhood before the police report is even filed. Okay, so that is the reality of this policy. And Trump says that somebody murders somebody and they're out on no cash bail before the day is out. I mean, that's what's going on in Chicago, and that's what he wants to end in Chicago. So now the Network for Pretrial Justice says that Trump is lying and that violent crime has actually gone down. Well, of course, violent crime has gone down because you guys don't even really report shootings or murders the way that they should be reported. Okay. And this Network for Pretrial Justice, some organization, some left-wing organization is saying that Illinois is safer because of no cash bail. Gay, stupid. Can I say it's gay? I don't know. I always say that. That's just dumb. Literally just dumb. Because the crime stats are being manipulated. We know that. Now, you could say that there might be a slight statistical dip, but that really doesn't matter because there are families in Chicago and all over the state who have loved ones killed, attacked by someone, mugged, carjacked, and they've been jailed and then they've been released within the day. And that is the real measure of public safety. You can manipulate crime statistics all you want, but when you talk to people, the people see what's going on and they're living it. So that is a true measure of public safety, is how the people feel. I'm sure if you were to poll people in Chicago, they would say, yeah, I don't feel very safe. So Trump also talked about how Governor J.B. Pritzker might want to run for president in 2028. I like what you said, Jay. Jay, I agree with you. Pete Buttigieg is the useful idiot for the Dems in 2028. I don't think that Governor J.B. Pritzker, being the ambitious guy that he is, has a chance at 2028 because the establishment would see him as a threat. I believe it that Governor J.B. Pritzker is possibly looking at running for president because of his national TV appearances as of late. He's giving speeches at commencements. He's positioning himself as like a progressive alternative to Biden, to Kamala. A younger alternative to Biden, at least, right? And here's the problem, okay? You can't run the country if you can't even run your own state. I mean, he has deliberately run the state into the ground because I think that he is on a revenge power trip, okay? Because he has revenge in his heart because of him getting kicked out of the private sector or not succeeding in the private sector. Now, Donald Trump would know that better than anybody else, I think. The inner workings of the Pritzker family being that he's kind of in the same industry, the hotel enterprise. Chicago's your backyard, man, and Chicago's failing. It's burning down, and that's on you. And I would not have these national aspirations if I were you, because you are going to find out pretty quickly that you will not be well received by the public, okay, if you are screwing things up in your own state, which was the case on NBC with Kristen Welker, okay? So she obliterated him for the hypocrisy, okay, with gerrymandering. I want to go to the Word of God now and what it says about justice. We're talking about the Safety Act this morning. I like to bring the Christian worldview because really what we're dealing with is not a battle between flesh and blood. It is a battle between spirits, and these people have an evil spirit. There is an evil spirit there that we have to deal with and reckon with. And the best way to deal with that is by pointing to the scriptures. Ecclesiastes 8:11 says, when the sentence for the crime is not quickly carried out, people's hearts are filled with schemes to do wrong. Okay, so you have to quickly deal with crime. There has to be consequences, and it has to happen quickly. Otherwise, you're going to get people who say, oh, there are no consequences. Then your heart wells up with schemes to do wrong. And that's what we're seeing play out. So again, like I said, Democrats are just anti-Christians. They looked at Ecclesiastes 8:12 and they said, what can we pass that makes it to where we don't deal with crime quickly? That would be no cash bail, where, these people are released and then you have to chase them down for their court date. There's no real reason for them to come back. And, they're not dealt with quickly and the sentence isn't carried out quickly. So that's what's happening in Illinois. If criminals know that they can walk free without posting bail, they lose fear of consequence, or they lose the fear of consequence. Okay, so that's what's happening in Illinois. And a society without consequence is headed for collapse. And that's what we're seeing here in the state of Illinois, just complete and utter collapse. It's a disaster, as President Donald Trump said. Our job as believers is to uphold justice, which means holding leaders accountable when they pervert justice and when they act against the biblical positions of justice, like the biblical position that Ecclesiastes 8:11 points out. They just act in direct violation, like complete. This is not carried out quickly, like no cash bail, makes it really, really like an elongated process for that criminal to be held accountable. Mercy without justice isn't love. Okay, it's lawlessness. So there has to be mercy and justice. And I've talked about this, how our God, Yahweh, is a God of mercy and justice. Okay, so mercy, Jesus dying on the cross. We didn't have to die on the cross. We didn't have to suffer a forever or a death, a permanent death. We have eternal life through Jesus Christ. Jesus was the sacrifice. That's mercy, because it was one person versus all of us dying. One person died. That was Jesus. And justice, Jesus didn't die, in his sleep peacefully. He died a very gruesome death, 33 lashings. That said, there's 33 strands of diseases. He died. He had 33 lashings on his back. It's symbolic of the 33 diseases, actually. It's strands of diseases, which is fascinating to me. Like, he took a stripe for every strand of disease. So it was a sacrifice, because the wages of sin's death, and there is sickness and imperfection in the world. But through this justice, and through his death, and through that sacrifice, we have eternal life. And he is a God of mercy and justice. And if you just look at the crucifixion, it proves that. Now, other religions, such as like Islam, okay, Islam believes that Allah, the God, which is what that's translated to, Yahweh, our God, is translated to I am. But Allah, the God, is a God of mercy, and that justice is theirs, okay, on the earth, which is why you see such radical terrorism in the name of Allah, because the principles in Quran lay out that justice is yours. Notice how in the Bible, God says, justice is mine, saith the Lord, right? He is a God of mercy and justice. And we are to reflect that in our societies. Okay, mercy and justice. Mercy without justice is lawlessness. It's not love. Okay, so we have to have both mercy and justice. And what we have with the Safety Act is not justice. Okay, so here's the recap. I want to recap this for us. Be sure to subscribe if you're watching. The recap of the press conference. Donald Trump said that Chicago is a disaster. Pritzker says, thanks for the compliment. Donald Trump says he'll reverse no cash bail. Pritzker says that Trump is a felon. The people of Illinois are saying, can somebody please just make our streets safe again? We would love to have safe streets. And it's really annoying because, and I hope something actually comes of this. And Donald Trump, he was talking about Congress stepping in and possibly at a national level eliminating these policies of no cash bail. And I hope that actually comes to fruition, because right now it looks like two chefs arguing who can cook better, okay, while the kitchen is on fire. That's what it looked like to me, the press conference. Love Donald Trump. He definitely talked about policy, talked about the crime. He addressed the substance of the argument. Pritzker did not. But it's annoying that we're still talking about Chicago crime. I mean, this has been going on for decades. And when the hell is something actually going to be done? And I hope Congress gets their heads out of their asses and they actually do something. Because, to be honest with you, I'm very disappointed with our majority in Congress, because it feels like yes, the BBB, huge win overall. There were things in it that I didn't like. For example, we have the Republican majority. Why the hell did we not get what we wanted with the suppressor tax? Okay, they zeroed out the tax, but we still have to register our suppressors. That is not a Second Amendment win. Okay, we have the majority. Why didn't we go all the way with it? There were things in the BBB that we could have really went all the way with, but we didn't. I don't know why. We are compromising when we have the majority. Okay, so I hope that they take this issue up in Congress. All right. In closing, here's what I want you to take away. Crime isn't partisan. If you're a Republican, a dangerous neighborhood is a dangerous neighborhood. If you're a Democrat, a dangerous neighborhood is a dangerous neighborhood, and you're in danger. Okay. The solutions are partisan, however, because one side, the Governor J.B. Pritzkers of the world, they believe that they can experiment with social justice theories, and the body count continues to rise while they experiment with social justice theories, and nonprofit. They put nonprofit organization, criminal justice organizations in charge of that social justice effort. Okay. And the body count continues to rise under their policies. And then the other side, the Donald Trump side, the Republican side, there's a belief that, hey, we have to have law, order, and accountability and swift consequences, as Ecclesiastes points out in chapter 8, verse 11. So whether Trump sends the National Guard or not, whether cash bail is restored or not, Illinois voters have a choice. We can keep electing leaders like JB, okay, who protect criminals, or we can elect somebody in 2028 for president who isn't JB. I hope it's JD Vance. We can elect somebody like him rather than JB, and we can make our decisions at the ballot box. You know, despite what Congress does, despite whether or not Trump actually sends the National Guard to Chicago, we can do something, and that is choose the right choice at the ballot box. All right. Do you want to chat a little bit about the Sunday interview on Meet the Press? So I talked about this yesterday. If you missed the video, go check it out. It's archived for you. Go hit the like button, smash the like button here on this video, subscribe. While you're here, I talked about this in the context that Kristen Welker of NBC went after Governor J.B. Pritzker for the hypocrisy, the gerrymandering maps, asked him about the hypocrisy of the gerrymandered maps in Illinois. What we didn't talk about, he also didn't rule out a future run for president, by the way, in that interview. Now, he couldn't help himself. He gave very hypocritical answers regarding the Texas redistricting question. It was a question that he kind of fumbled on. He gave like a really canned, stupid response. Or like, I wouldn't say it's stupid. Okay, so essentially he said that, you know, and I'm reading between the lines here. What I think Governor J.B. Pritzker was saying with his answer there with NBC was, well, Illinois redistricts or our redistricting, our gerrymandering is done for equity purposes. So we draw out the rural voters and the white voters, particularly. So that way we can kind of balance the scales here, because that's really the Democrat position. They believe, or they will tell people, that they gerrymander for the minorities and they gerrymander in favor of the urban voters because they were wronged. And it's very divisive ideology that they have, and they gerrymander based on that divisive ideology. So we are left with 43% of the electorate being Republicans, but only 3 Republican congressmen. Okay, so tell me how that makes sense. Essentially, if you read between the lines of what Governor J.B. Pritzker said, he said it in a very much not way I'm going to say it right now. Essentially what he said was, well, we gerrymander for the black people. So Texas is currently gerrymandering for the white people. And we gerrymander for the black people, for the minorities. So it makes it okay. That's essentially like when I read between the lines there, I think that's what he was trying to go towards. He did not say that like outright, like I just did, but come on, let's read between the lines here. He essentially was saying that it's okay for them to gerrymander because we do it for the minorities, right? Now, we did not get to this yesterday. He dealt with another question from Kristen Welker, and he kind of fumbled this one as well. You have a New York City Democrat Socialist mayoral candidate. His name is Zoran Mamdani. Have you heard of him? He is demonizing billionaires out there. But guess what? Pritzker is a billionaire, and he is a leader within the Democrat Party. I wouldn't say that he's going to be the Democratic nominee. Like I said, I think that is reserved for Pete Buttigieg, because he's a useful idiot, and the establishment does not want somebody as ambitious as Governor J.B. Pritzker. So Mamdani says that billionaires have no place in the party, really. Here's what he told Welker in a previous interview. Okay. He says, quote, "I don't think we should have billionaires because, quite frankly, it's so much money in a moment of such inequality." This is what Mamdani told Welker in a previous interview. That statement is truly problematic, obviously, because he's saying essentially that he wants to eliminate billionaires. Okay, now how would they do that? Think about this for a second. I don't know how Mamdani would plan to eliminate billionaires. You would probably have to determine how much people make, determine how much people take home, and in the case of Governor J.B. Pritzker, you know, how much people inherit, right? Or take, you know, you would have to put income thresholds on people. You would have to put inheritance thresholds on people in order for them not to become billionaires. It does not sound like a planet I want to live on, okay, or a nation that I want to live in, where we essentially determine how much money each person makes, and there's a cap, okay? So Mamdani and the radicals, who are presently animating the Democrat Party, your AOCs, your Jasmine Crockett's, your, I think his name is Maxwell Frost. He's another one we have to kind of look out for. Maxwell Frost. Yeah, he is a representative out of Florida. There are a lot of these younger radicals in the Democrat Party, and they're really animating, I would say, the Democrat Party. And these are the people who are constantly in the spotlight and are pushing out their ideas as the mainstream. And if you're a Democrat who has any sense at all, you should tell them to cut it out. Okay, you should tell your Maxwell Frost, your Mamdanis, your AOCs, your Jasmine Crockett's to shut the bleep up. Okay, shut up, because that is not the Democrat position. You're never going to get us elected if you are talking about putting income caps on people and determining what people make in this country. You're never going to get elected that way. People don't like that. So anyway, in addition to the fact that the government shouldn't be determining how much money people make, if you did manage to eliminate billionaires, you'd be eliminating a lot of the things that they fund, okay, including these people like AOC, like Jasmine Crockett, like Maxwell Frost, you know, like Mamdani, okay? So there's billionaires that fund these types of progressive candidates, okay, and their causes, okay, whether they fund them, you know, indirectly through nonprofits. So billionaires like George Soros, they will fund these radical nonprofits, and then in turn, these radical nonprofits donate to the politicians. Okay, that's kind of how the money moves. So I think it's funny that they say, like people like Mamdani say, down with the rich or tax the rich or eliminate billionaires, because you're actually calling for the elimination of yourself in a roundabout way. But Pritzker's response here, I want to get to this. Pritzker's response to Welker on this issue, to Mamdani calling for the elimination of billionaires, was pretty bad. His response was just as bad as his gerrymandering, redistricting response. Welker asked about people in his party being billionaires, and let's take a listen. Here we go.
I want to talk about the future now of your party. You're one of the leaders of the Democratic Party. You are also a billionaire. Some in your party are openly questioning whether billionaires such as yourself should exist at all, Governor. Just listen to what Zohran Mamdani, New York City's Democratic nominee for mayor, told me recently. Take a look. Do you think that billionaires have a right to exist?
I don't think that we should have billionaires because, frankly, it is so much money in a moment of such inequality.
Governor, is that the kind of message that Democrats should be embracing?
Look, how much money you have doesn't determine what your values are. And I'm a Democrat because I believe that everyone deserves health care. I'm a Democrat because I believe we've got to fund education and have a free public education available to every kid in this country. I'm a Democrat because I believe that we've got to stand up for our democracy and against the MAGA Republicans who are literally trying to take away people's rights all across this country. So it does not matter what your income level is. What matters is what your values are, and that's what makes me a Democrat.
Okie dokie. Okay, so you heard that there. The simple, honest answer here, what Governor J.B. Pritzker should have said was, no, that's ridiculous. And that is not a platform of the Democrat Party that we want to eliminate billionaires. That's stupid. That should have been his response. But of course, he, sugarcoated it. Pritzker launched into an effort to, his response here was an effort to explain how values, his values determine whether or not he's a Democrat. Even if he is a billionaire, that he's still got the values of a Democrat, which is fascinating to me. Really, when Governor J.B. Pritzker talks, he says, healthcare is a right, education is a right. It's socialism. It's pretty much the same values as Mamdani. Okay. He's just not as radical or blatant about his beliefs, but that's all socialism. Calling for healthcare for all, calling for education for all. It's just straight up socialism. Now, what Governor J.B. Pritzker won't say, and, if you read between the lines there of what he said, he's really all about propping up the public sector. That is what the Democrat Party is all about, propping up this entirely new economy where it doesn't function in the free market. Okay, so that is socialism. They like that because they're lazy. They like that because they want to seek revenge on the people who made it, sell a product, sell a service, and actually made it in life. They are angry, bitter people. So that is the values the Democrats have. Anything that props up this entire sector of the economy that doesn't produce anything or make anything. Okay, that's what they're all about. He says, look, how much money you have doesn't determine what your values are. Then he went on this typical rant about healthcare, democracy, and MAGA Republicans, right? It doesn't matter what your income level is. It matters what your values are. And obviously, it doesn't matter what your income level is, because look what we've done with the pension system. The unfunded liability that we have to the tune of $145 billion. They don't care what your income level is. Democrats, they want your income level to be crazy through the roof as long as the taxpayer pays for it. Okay. But he goes on, he says that's what makes me a Democrat. It's what your values are. Now, he never addressed the premise of what Mamdani said was wrong. Why the premise of what Mamdani said was wrong. He never addressed that. He didn't give a clear answer that, hey, that's ridiculous. We're not going to eliminate billionaires because, if you looked at that from a logistical standpoint, you'd have to put income thresholds on people if you wanted to eliminate billionaires. Then there's all the money that Democrats get from billionaires. Okay. So, I guess we're just going to pretend that doesn't exist and that Mamdani doesn't really see that, and that he's, it's completely lost on him that Democrats are constantly funded by Democrat billionaires like George Soros via these nonprofit organizations and these 501c4s, these political action committees who have connections with these left-wing billionaires. Mamdani, Governor J.B. Pritzker, he funds a lot of ballot initiatives that Mamdani would probably be pro those initiatives, pro those candidates through his various philanthropic organizations. Governor J.B. Pritzker puts a bunch of his money money into that. And then it gets funneled into Democrat coffers. So the problem is with Democrats as a whole, they won't deal with this dichotomy in this chaos within their ranks. You have the radical left wing, and they have really captured and they are really defining what the party is. And unless you reject that, okay, it's going to eat you whole, eat you up. Okay, the Democrat Party is already record lows. I think there's a 19% approval rating at this point. And there's not going to be anything left except the really radical parts. And if we're not already there, I think that we're already there where there's just the radical parts. And I think the reason why Democrats like Governor J.B. Pritzker don't just dismiss Mamdani as a wingnut, okay, and they won't come out and strongly say, no, the Democrat Party doesn't believe in eliminating billionaires, because logistically, like, what would that look like? That would mean income thresholds. That's obviously not what we're for. I think that the reason why they don't say that is because really they're all for it. Like Governor J.B. Pritzker is all for it. It's just that these left-wing idiots like Mamdani AOC don't realize that they're getting rich, and they're becoming billionaires, but it's a separate economy. They don't like the billionaires in the private sector. They're all for the billionaires in the public sector, but they don't want you to believe that those exist. And that there are people out there getting pensions to the tune of $200,000 a year. They don't want you to look at that. They say, oh, those are public servants. Those people getting those big exorbitant pensions, the people who are making billions in government, those are not the same as your evil corporate billionaires in the private sector. Okay, so when the radical left wing calls out billionaires, I think that they are deliberately talking about the billionaire, or they are actually talking about the billionaires in the private sector. And they don't say that, outright. They just say billionaires because it's, a grenade for headlines. Down with the billionaires, tax the rich. But really what they're talking about is taxing the rich in the private sector in order for that wealth to shift over to them, okay, in the public sector. All right, I got to take a quick break, but we're going to come back. Speaking about left-wingers, there were some left-wing protesters who were, of course, staged. We could have predicted this. They staged a protest in Washington, D.C. over Trump's crime crackdown because he's federalizing the city. And something shocking happened just blocks over from this protest. So we're going to get to that. Plus, I don't know if you've heard this story. Peanut and Fred. I haven't talked about them in a while, but there is justice possibly for them here soon. This couple who owned Peanut and Fred, they were the raccoon and the squirrel in New York. The couple is suing New York for a massive amount of money after they executed, and documentation shows that the New York state agencies, they all coordinated to execute their beloved pets. Okay, so this was a pet raccoon, a pet squirrel, and they were executed by state agencies. And now the couple who owned the pet squirrel and the pet raccoon, they are now suing the state. I'm going to get to all of it here on Conservative Cat. Be sure to subscribe right now. Hit the subscribe button. I'll be right back. Hey, you're listening to the Conservative Cat Clips. This is the place where we don't call 911 first. Nope, we pray, we prepare, and yes, we pack heat. Every time there's a tragedy, the media and the Democrats, they start crying, do something, and do something. And what they mean is more laws, more bans, and more restrictions, not on criminals, mind you, but on law-abiding citizens. So let me tell you what evil doesn't care about. They don't care about legislation. The man willing to break the sixth commandment, thou shalt not murder, doesn't blink twice at your AR-15 ban. Okay, he doesn't read your gun-free zone signs. He sees those signs and he says, this is an invitation for me. Gun control doesn't stop evil. It disarms good people. The founding fathers didn't give us the Second Amendment so we could go hunting. They gave us the Second Amendment to protect ourselves against tyrants, both foreign and domestic. And newsflash, tyrants don't tend to announce themselves. They come wearing smiles and waving around fancy policies. And I also want to talk about self-defense today. Self-defense. The average police response time in big cities like Chicago could be up to 10 minutes, sometimes even longer. I know the Chicago PD is really struggling with that. Response times in rural areas, it could get up to even 30 minutes response time. So if somebody kicks down your door, are you going to ask them to wait until the government sends backup to protect you, or are you going to protect your family and take matters into your own hands? So grandma, okay, in Peoria, Illinois, she is just trying to defend her property, but yet she's the one treated like a criminal. She has to go through all kinds of crazy background checks, permits, training. And the thug in Chicago, he gets the gun out of his trunk in an alley, and he didn't think twice about our laws, okay? It's about power. It always has been. Every dictatorship in history has disarmed their citizens first. First, that's Stalin, that's Hitler, that's Mao. They didn't want competition. And once the guns were gone, so were the rights, the freedom, and the people. So a disarmed people is a controlled people. But an armed, faithful, and free people, that is a nightmare for tyrants. And really, it's a blessing to your neighbors if you are armed. The Second Amendment isn't outdated. It's eternal. And just like evil, just like our right, just like the evil has the right to do evil things, and that they will, we have the right to resist evil and to arm ourselves. And the Second Amendment is pretty dang clear, shall not be infringed. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. Hey, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the like button, subscribe. President Donald Trump's decision to federalize the DC Metropolitan Police Department continues to cause mass anxiety amongst the left. Okay, so there is a lot of anxiety and chaos amongst the left right now because of Donald Trump's decision to federalize. Despite the move being, unquestionably allowed, and this is allowed under the Home Rule Act of 1973, which deals with the nation's capital as a federal district, accusations of fascism, democracy, being threatened. They have been thrown around. They have been flowed out there like milk and honey. Okay, so fascism, an attack on our democracy, right? The left is saying all of that. In other words, it's just another day of the week. How did we get here? Well, there has been a series of high-profile murders and violent assaults that caught the attention of the president. And instead of taking action immediately, the administration did ask the Democrat-led city council, the leaders there, the mayor, to act and to repeal some of their ineffective, harmful social justice policies that were letting criminals off the hook. Okay. So before they took this action, they said, hey, get your crap together. Okay. Expectedly, the Democrat leaders in the city, they refused to, repeal some of their ineffective policies. And as a consequence of that, the decision came down. Okay. As a consequence of them not repealing some of their ineffective policies, this is why Donald Trump made the decision to federalize. Okay. Wanted to get that out of the way. DC is the most liberal, probably major city outside of Chicago, maybe, in the country. Kamala Harris, she won 90% of the vote in 2024 here, which is crazy. So very liberal, major city. It was only a matter of time before protests started to erupt there over this decision to federalize. Okay. So on Monday, yesterday, very, very angry left-wing protesters, they took to the streets. Now protesters took to the street and they were on 14th Street Northwest. I don't know DuPont Circle. I'm not super familiar with the Washington, D.C. area. I did go once, and I will say this. That was quite a few years ago, in 2021, actually. It's when I went to D.C., and it was disgusting. It's one of those places I will never visit again. It was that bad. I ran into a bunch of homeless people. It was very, very dangerous. I was walking at night. I was very scared. Luckily, I had some friends with me, some male friends, and I think that's what, scared people off. If I had been alone walking, I don't know if I would be here today talking with you. It's a very scary place, and not a lot of people talk about this. Chicago is kind of known for the rats, but there is a big rat problem in DC, and nobody really talked about that so far. At least when I was there, I saw 4 or 5 rats, which is kind of gross. Just walking the streets, I was there to visit the Capitol, because history, and I wanted to check it out. I wanted to go see the Capitol. Very gross city. We'll never go again, which is what Donald Trump wants to kind of avoid, because why would we want our tourists who go to visit the nation's capital? Why would we want them to never want to come back? Okay, we definitely don't want to put that face forward. Let's take a look here at the protests that have been going on.
Breaking right now in the district, you can see people here holding signs, gathering across the city to protest President Trump's federal takeover of the police. The live pictures right now showing you the congregation of marchers here in Northwest DC, protesters starting in DuPont Circle. We hear that they are making their way north of 14th Street. They are calling on the president to step down and lay off the district. Of course, we are going to have much more on President Trump's announcement and reaction. That's coming up at 6:30. Breaking right now in the district, you can see people here holding signs, gathering across the city to protest.
Okay. So I wanted to share that with you. Really love this comment. I actually want to get to your comment here because I don't know how many people have seen this yet. And I was going to play it here, but I'm kind of running out of time. I might try to get to Benny Johnson's clip, but you bring up Jasmine Crockett and rich people like Jasmine Crockett. She tries to pretend like she's from the ghetto. Benny Johnson did an entire piece, like an expose. He actually visited her childhood school and where she grew up. It turns out she's a princess. Okay, she had it very good growing up. Went to one of the most elite high schools in the nation. Continued her elite education. I like this comment. I don't understand what this price cap is all about. It's to keep. Yeah, I don't understand what the price cap is all about. It's to keep the poor and the rich, like people like Jasmine Crockett and people like Elizabeth Warren, and Maggie Hassan. So, yes, exactly. They say tax the rich. Like when AOC wears that dress that says tax the rich, when Mamdani talks about eliminating billionaires, they're talking about specifically people who have had success in the private sector. They're not talking about their own. So the only people who are billionaires and are Democrats, they are the ones who got rich off of the backs of other people. Okay, they are tyrants, kings, and queens. Okay, so that is exactly what Jasmine Crockett is. She got rich off the backs of other people. If you take a look at her district, it is a complete and utter hellhole. Okay, so she's getting rich. She could care less about her district. That's very evident by the crack pipes in the street, the trash up and down the sidewalks of the school districts. I mean, there was an elementary school featured, and I hope I can get to it. It's rather long, the Benny Johnson expose that he did on Jasmine Crockett. But there's a school district in her it's an elementary school in her district, and the sidewalk going up to the school covered in trash and homelessness. I mean, it's just so sad. And she is getting rich at the expense of her people in her district. And that's how tyrants work. So Mamdani, when he says, let's eliminate the billionaires, he's not talking about the Governor J.B. Pritzkers or the George Soroses or the Elizabeth Warrens or the Jasmine Crockett's. Okay, he's not talking about that elite, those elitists. He's talking about the Donald Trumps, the people who got rich in the private sector. And then later turned out, Donald Trump, of course, later went into the public sector. Okay, he went into the public sector very late in his life. He's a known billionaire before that, before getting into the private or public sector. His wealth actually has dwindled since entering public office, and his net worth has dwindled. I think that Pritzker probably has surpassed him on the list of richest politicians. But Mamdani, AOC, when they say down with the rich, they're not talking about themselves or about the governor, J.B. Pritzker, or George Soros, or Elizabeth Warren's or Bernie Sanders. They're not talking about those people because they are participating in a totally separate economy than that of you and I. We are participating in the free market and in the real world, where we exchange goods and services and we pay each other cash, okay? And we participate in this little thing called life. These people don't, and they want to suck everything out of you in order to give people free health care. You will have nothing and you will be happy. That is their philosophy. They are radical socialists. And, they don't come out and say that. So Governor J.B. Pritzker didn't come out and condemn Mamdani because he actually believes it. He doesn't want people in the private sector to succeed. He doesn't want rich people in the private sector. So what comes to mind, Darren Bailey, actually, not super rich by any means, probably a wealthy farmer. If I had to guess, millions. Okay. He might be considered a millionaire. He doesn't like those types of people, people who actually make a living and wind up being millionaires or billionaires because of this gradual work that they've done in the private sector. They don't like those types of people. And they want to take money away from those types of people so they can continue to operate in their own separate economy, which is the public sector. Okay, sorry, I went on this little rabbit hole, but I appreciate the comment. Yeah, Crockett went to a private school, and she still she got all that money and can't fix that crooked eye. Oh, I don't know if she has a crooked eye. Yeah, she's got those falsies. I don't know if she gets permanent false eyelashes, like semi-permanent. Those are really expensive. By the way, I don't know if she has a crooked eye, but yeah, she did go to private school all her life, had the elite of education, like the most elitist education I've ever seen, probably the best education, some of the best schools. And then she winds up becoming a congresswoman, and then her district looks like it does. I mean, that is the definition of a tyrant. All right, getting rich at the expense of everybody else and not helping your fellow man get a leg up, and staying at the top in your ivory tower. Anyway, so I showed you the protests that are going on in D.C. You can't make this stuff up. They actually staged a protest here. I shared this with you. Of course, they've got their banners that read, "Trump must go," and I think it's so hilarious when they have these signs like "Trump must go," because I'm sure he's going to put in his resignation tomorrow because your banner says, hey, you got to leave the White House. Come on. Seriously though, if you know anything about this part of town, about Washington, D.C., that's a complete and utter hellhole. Now, the protesters, they were in Northwest D.C., and this is well known to be kind of a very white bread, not my backyard kind of vibe. Okay, so these are white liberals. This is known to be the safest quadrant of the city where this protest was held. You got a bunch of white liberals, of course, here in this clip. I shared this with you. Bunch of white liberals running around, "Trump must go now." And they're protesting. Most likely these people have never been victims of violent crime. which is probably why they're protesting against the president for trying to stop violent crime, because they've never really experienced violent crime because they don't live in these higher crime areas. This is a quadrant of the city that is like well known and is notorious for being safer. And what's fascinating about this is that just moments after marching, and they're in this nice northwest quadrant, it actually turns out just a few blocks away in Logan Circle, a person was presumably murdered. Okay, so this happened, they were marching on 14th Street Northwest, and they were showing their disdain for the orange man bad. And like just a few blocks away, somebody was murdered. Okay, a person was shot and left unconscious. He wasn't breathing. The shooting happened near Logan Circle and 12th Northwest in Washington, D.C. They were on 14th. This was just blocks away. So you can't make this stuff up. The Democrats, they staged this protest. They were demanding Trump's resignation. Orange man bad. They were upset over his push to make D.C. safer. And they couldn't even finish their march before a shooting happened right next to them. Like, this is straight up out of a Babylon Bee article, right? Like, you can't make this stuff up. And I don't want to make light of this because somebody died at the end of the day. At least I presume he was dead. I haven't seen any reports that he's not dead. He could have been revived. It was a non-breathing person. Presumably this person died. I haven't seen much else from this report about this person. But this irony should not be ignored. DC obviously has a huge problem, a crime problem, and I don't give a crap about the manipulation of data, and you can say that crime is going down all you want. People know that's not true. And it's shameful that the city council and that these liberals in this blue city, they haven't done anything for their residents. They haven't pretended to care about their residents. And they're more worried about opposing Donald Trump than stopping the shooting of innocent people, stopping people from being murdered. They're more concerned about Orange Man bad and calling for his resignation. And calling for the resignation because he's trying to clean up DC and because he's trying to push for a safer DC. If you've ever been to DC, it sucks. I would say that not a lot of people talk about the rat problem. There's a huge rat problem. I mean, I think I saw 5 rats when I was walking down the street. It was nasty. I got scared. I was in the dark and like rats were coming out. Not a place I would want to visit again. And that is not something you want to hear from American citizens about our nation's capital. And that's what Donald Trump is seeing, that people don't want to go visit the nation's capital because of how bad it is there. And he wants to put an end to it. Okay, so let's shift gears. I do want to get to this story today because I talked a lot about Peanut the squirrel because I loved this little squirrel. I followed him on TikTok like religiously. Loved this little pet squirrel and the little pet raccoon. Fred didn't have his own TikTok. And really, at the end of the day, what I think New York did, they didn't like that this guy was making money on his own. He was an entrepreneur. Okay. And I don't think that the public sector really likes that when people make money, and he made money off his beloved pet squirrel, Peanut. And I think that's why officials, according to documentation, coordinated an attack and executed this squirrel and this raccoon at this family farm. So let's go to New York. Okay. The liberals' kryptonite, I'll get to some of your comments here, is common sense. Exactly. Yeah, they make millions of dollars in government, and they think they deserve it, but they produce nothing. That's why they hate the private sector, because the private sector actually gets things done. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. These people, I like to call it revenge of the nerds. Governor J.B. Pritzker is the epitome of revenge of the nerds. His family, allegedly, according to President Donald Trump, kicked him out of the family business. And then he turns around and suckles the taxpayer dry. Okay, these people who work in the private sector, he suckles them dry and sucks the life out of small businesses, right? Those signs that are everywhere in Illinois. And I think he does it quite literally out of revenge, because it boils down to this. There are people who want to get rich quick and like these quick fixes, the quick satisfaction gratification. It's just anti-biblical. And there's people like that out in the world. And then there's people who understand that, hey, I've got to put my head down. I've got to do some work. I've got to grind it out. I got to go get this bread, and I got to leave an inheritance for my children. And they grow up with that biblical belief, and the two butt heads with each other. Being governor is a hobby for Pritzker. Precisely. It's a hobby for him. It's a way of seeking revenge. I really think he's in the position because he doesn't like people like Donald Trump, and he doesn't like certain corporations. He wants to uplift his friends in the public sector, or sectors that are favorable to the private or to the public sector. So, for example, you'll have these quantum computing industries or electric vehicle industries, and the public sector props them up via tax credits. Okay, so these aren't actually private businesses. They're tech startups, okay, or they're like startups who survive on taxpayer credits. So there are those types of corporations as well. And Governor J.B. Pritzker has no bone to pick with those. The bones he has to pick are with, or the utility companies like ComEd, right? Those are you scratch my back, I scratch your back kind of corporations. We saw that with Michael Madigan. Like, actually, there were some bribes going on there, and Michael Madigan is serving in prison because of over that. So he doesn't mind those companies. I want to be clear about that. They're not totally anti-corporation. They're just anti-corporation that makes it on their own without tax credits. And they're anti-people who make it on their own without the help of the taxpayer, okay? All right, I do want to get to this story, I swear. I'm going to get to this. So this New York couple, they had a little pet squirrel and a raccoon, and they were killed by wildlife officials in 2024. Now, this couple has decided to seek justice after the pain that they've gone through. So during the 2024 presidential campaign, I covered this. The story really hit home with a lot of people because it speaks about the government overreach, or it speaks to government overreach. It's really just a story of government overreach. And Peanut the squirrel, known as Peanut, and his furry little friend, Fred the raccoon, these were animals that were executed. They were animals that were rescued originally by Mark Longo and his girlfriend, Daniela. Now, these two little guys, these two little furry little friends, they were living happily ever after, right, on the Freedom Farm Animal Sanctuary. Okay, so this is a little farm that he and his girlfriend had, Mark and his girlfriend. And Peanut became very, very famous on TikTok. Okay, so he's got numerous videos out there, Mark with the squirrel, and they would, get into all kinds of shenanigans, and they would go viral. And I mean, really, this guy was making probably lots of money on social media with Peanut the squirrel, okay, because it was just terrific content. He was an entrepreneur. They have this little family farm that they would open up to the public. They were entrepreneurs. And guess who hates entrepreneurs? The government. So they were living happily ever after until October 30th happened. And then the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, the DEC, they raided the sanctuary, the family farm. And they took Peanut, they took Fred, and they killed them. Now, at the time of the killing, October 30th, 2024, this was right around the election, authorities alleged that the squirrel had bitten one of the DEC officials. Due to rabies risk, both the pets had to be decapitated and tested for rabies. So yesterday, the New York Post reports that Longo, Mark, and his girlfriend, Daniela, are now seeking justice for their late little furry friends. suing the state of New York. According to the lawsuit filed in New York Court of Claims, the grieving couple is seeking $10 million, which is probably less than what that squirrel was worth. Like, I'm sure this guy was making a pretty penny off the squirrel because the TikTok videos, okay? Viral content, ads, and all kinds of stuff, right? So they're seeking damages, $10 million, after the state seized and euthanized Peanut and Fred. Subsequently, after the animals were dead and tested, guess what? The results came back and they were negative for rabies. So they didn't actually even have rabies. This is so sad. So the owners of Peanut, the squirrel, and Fred, the raccoon, they are suing. They're seeking $10 million. Despite the unnecessary death of their animals, no one from the state has apologized or tried to make amends. And that's like the biggest thing, I think. Like, this could probably all go away if somebody just said, like, we're sorry, this was, an overreach on our part. We were fed bad information. We thought that you had dangerous animals at your farm. And we euthanized your pets because we thought they were a danger. We totally misjudged that. We're sorry. Like, I feel like this could all be taken care of with a simple apology, maybe. But they haven't come out and apologized. So let's take a listen to this. Here we go.
Last but not least, the owners of Peanut the squirrel are suing the state of New York over the death of their beloved pet, and it could result in a huge check. According to the New York Post, Peanut's owners are seeking $10 million after the state seized and euthanized Peanut and their raccoon named Fred last year. The state claimed both animals were euthanized due to a rabies risk. Tests later came back negative, but both animals had already been put down. Last but not least, the owners of Peanut the squirrel.
All right. So I wanted to share that with you. What was the criminality behind the bureaucracy for this raid? So what was the crime? So I think that, if I remember the story, I'm going to have to pull this up because all I've got is the new court documents about the lawsuit that they've launched, Mark and Daniela, against the DEC here. But they were fed misinformation, or what I'm going to say is misinformation, but I think a neighbor called them, I guess, and said that there were animals on the farm that had rabies or that had bitten people and were vicious, right? And that's what prompted DEC to go out there. Which, like, nobody came forward and actually, like, lodged a complaint about the animals, like, in an official capacity. So it's hard to say what actually their crime was. Really, what I think was going on was the TikToks were getting very viral, and they wanted to make a statement like, hey, you can't be an entrepreneur and make money off of your pets in this way. We don't like when you do that. And we don't like you having a family farm and opening it up to the public. And we don't like this sense of community. Really, I think I know that sounds simple, but the government hates happiness. And the squirrel was bringing happiness to people in the community and online. People really liked the little squirrel. And it was just so innocent, and the government hates innocence, right? Look at what they're doing in the classrooms, providing porn books to kids. They hate innocence. So here's what the court documents say. Take a listen to this. The killing of Peanut and Fred was not due to a fear of rabies, but it was a senseless act of violence. And it was an obscene demonstration of government abuse. Okay, so the people who are listed as defendants in this case in the lawsuit, the DEC, the DOH, Department, I think, of Health, I think is the DOH, and the state. The allegations echo those outlined in a separate lawsuit. So they have the lawsuit against the state, but there was another lawsuit Mark and Danielle filed on June 27th in their county Supreme Court, the Chemung County Supreme Court, against the county, against the city that they live in, and against 36 individuals at the local level and state level of government. Okay, so they have two lawsuits kind of going right now. So that suit sought unspecified damages to be determined by a trial jury, or by a jury at trial. So the one that they're seeking against the DEC, the DOH, and the state, that one is 10 million. Now, jury at trial is going to have to determine the damages in this separate suit against the county and against the city officials and the local officials. Okay. So the DEC story gets much worse here. And here's what Judicial Watch found. Here's the shocking part of the story. So Judicial Watch received 163 pages of records from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation in a lawsuit which show authorities had planned to euthanize the squirrel named Peanut. So that contradicts what they said, where they had to euthanize Peanut because he bit them. Okay, and they decapitated him and Fred, and that contradicts that, because according to documents that were turned over to Judicial Watch, it turns out that there were people planning the execution of these pets. The documents show an abuse of power. There were 12 officers who were sent to raid and seize Peanut and Fred, who the bureaucrats decided beforehand would be killed. So they decided, according to documents, they were going to kill these two little pets. A statement from Judicial Watch says that these documents show that the killing of Peanut, the squirrel, and Fred the raccoon was the result of pure government abuse and insanity. The event sparked public outrage. President Donald Trump supporters denounced the death of Peanut the squirrel as a case of government overreach. J.D. Vance, campaigning for President Donald Trump at the time, said that then candidate Trump was fired up about Peanut being euthanized. So the United States Supreme Court Justice, even Neil Gorsuch, talked about this little squirrel and even gave the little squirrel a shout out at the time, saying that this was a classic case of government overreach, something that he had said we see way too often. We do see this way too often. And look, my hope is that they get that $10 million for the reckless actions of the government. Now, this tip that they received from this neighbor, this alleged tip that they received from the neighbor, did not warrant them going into the farm and executing Peanut and Fred. And we know that they had planned, according to documents, the execution of Peanut and Fred. So this is what leads me to speculate at this point that they didn't like the virality of the squirrel. And maybe they didn't like these people's politics. Maybe they didn't like the fact that people were going to the farm and that there was a sense of community there. Really, like I said, the government hates any sort of joy. And really, it's just anti-biblical. They can't stand. Misery demands company. And everybody in the public sector and in government, they pretty much are miserable. They're outcasts, and they hate anybody who actually goes out and makes a name for themselves and their entrepreneurs. So that's the crux, really, of today's show. So, I hope that this sends, like, if the $10 million is eventually awarded, which I don't see why it wouldn't be, to Mark and his girlfriend, Daniela, I hope that this sends, like, a ripple effect to other state agencies, to other government agencies, and that they think twice before going in and seizing things or killing animals. And I hope that these agencies think twice before overreaching. All right. Overreach is the operative word for Democrats. Yeah. Did the neighbor perjure themselves in the report as well? See, I'll have to look this up because I don't remember. The neighbor never was named. Like, it was an unnamed source. Okay. And it was a tip that they were going off of. So this was a phone call. So it was a Karen, essentially, ratting out that these people had animals. And of course, anytime you have a farm, and really that's probably what this case, they had a ton of animals on the farm, by the way. Like, it wasn't just the squirrel and the raccoon. This is an animal sanctuary. And for some odd reason, like the government really wants to know about the animals that you have and whether they're safe or not. For example, the state of Illinois, I have a Savannah cat. He's actually half Savannah cat. He's like sort of bigger house cat. Essentially, you guys can look it up. But the state of Illinois was seeking to ban the ownership of those because there was a Savannah cat somewhere that got let out and was hissing at a little girl menacingly. Fun fact, Savannah cats, they just hiss as a way of communication. It's not like a threatening sound. They just hiss instead of like meowing. My cat hisses all the time. So they don't like wildlife. And really, I think, like I said, you have to remember, Democrats are just the antithesis to the Bible. We were told to live in harmony with animals, to use animals, subdue the earth. Okay, they don't like that. Democrats hate that. Why? Because they are anti-biblical. And typically you'll find that Democrats are not really like they say they're pro-animal, but they're not. So for example, I think of the vegan movement, which is really catastrophic to animals, right? You're taking out entire ecosystems that they rely on, and you want to shift our entire food supply to their ecosystems, and we would eventually like kill these animals if we all went vegan. Okay. So like they say they're for the animals, but they're not. So everything that they say, just know it's the opposite. So notice how they say, we're not racist. We love Black people. We love minorities. Actually, they love keeping them in this state of welfare and enslaving them. The welfare state is the new form of slavery in the Democrat Party. Okay, so they're actually pro-slavery, much like they're anti-animal. They say they're pro-animal, but they're actually anti-animal. So I don't know where I was going with that. Actually, I think the crux of it was that this was a farm, and they don't like that they had animals there, and they went off of an unnamed neighbor. Okay, so does this neighbor exist? We don't even know because her name wasn't released. But this neighbor essentially snitched on them and said like they have a ton of animals over there and they don't have like the proper licenses, and they have exotic animals over there. So they went there I'd imagine to investigate and raid, and they overreached when they decided to kill the animals there. I think it was found that they might not have had like some licenses or something, that they were out of compliance, but it was like that was like a traffic ticket, like jaywalking. Like there was no need for an entire raid where all these state agencies came in. They could have simply called and said, hey, can you send us a copy of this license, and this license? How many animals do you have on your farm? And what animals do you have? Like they could have easily made a phone call instead of conducting a raid. So yeah, the welfare plantation. Exactly. They are everything that they say that they are actually the opposite. So they're actually anti-animal. The whole vegan movement is anti-animal. The whole like pro-minority, it's actually pro-welfare state, and it's a form of slavery. The neighbor sounds jealous of the attention they were getting. Yeah, that might actually be true. And where there was this neighbor, it could have been just the government though. And if you want my opinion, I think that the government just knew that these people were there and they were on this nice farm and with all this land, and they're just jealous, and they don't like that he was making all kinds of money from this little squirrel on TikTok, and they wanted in on it, the government. That's the worst story I've ever heard. They put down a squirrel and a raccoon because it was gaining more popularity than the liberals. Yeah, Well, and like I said, liberals are pretty much the revenge of the nerds. So they were your theater kids or your band geeks. And I know this because I was a theater kid and I was a band geek, but I never really fit in with that crowd. I was a Trump supporter. They really hated me in high school for that. I was a Trump supporter. They weren't. They all grew up to be like crazy liberals and like going to get their masters and gender studies or whatever, and they all grew up to be completely insufferable. But it was so fascinating because they were actually the popular kids growing up, and there's this shift going on in high schools. And if you talk to your kids about this, they'll tell you that there's this shift going on in high school where it used to be where the cheerleaders and the football players were the cool ones, right? Now those kids in my high school, they were demonized. Like the football kids were always in detention. They were always getting yelled at in the classroom. They were, I mean, somewhat popular, but not nearly as much as the band geeks and the theater kids. And really what was going on was the teachers, they would treat them like teachers' pets, and they were grooming them to be little activists, okay, the teachers, these theater kids and these band geeks. And I saw it like really play out in my high school. And they groomed those kids to be little activists and to go into school and education and academia. And they groomed them to become little activists and study gender studies. And then they're like forever in the public sector. So your college or like your band geeks and theater geeks typically went the public sector route and they stayed in college forever. Okay, now your football players and your cheerleaders, they're actually who Donald Trump is working for. This is the beating heart of America. Your cheerleaders turned out to be your hairdresser. They turned out to be, your grocery clerks, the people who actually make America go round. Your football players turned out to be linemen, okay, or construction workers, and they're actually working in the private sector, okay, and they're opening up businesses, lawn care businesses, and like they're actually trying to make something of themselves and start up small businesses. And you have these people who felt like they never got to be in the it crowd, like the popular crowd. Although they were like popular themselves, but in a much weirder, like different sense, in that like they were never getting in trouble and they were always giving all of the awards to the weird like theater kids, right? Or the geeks. And I know this because I kind of had a foot in both worlds. I was a cheerleader. I also like was a theater kid. I stopped cheerleading because I bought into this idea that, at the time I was like, those girls, they're just shallow and, I better, go all in on my academics and I better go get a college degree and I got to become a little activist. I mean, essentially. So, and in a way, I hate to admit it, I did become that, just in a very much different way that they probably would have preferred me to go. I went the right wing of activism, right? And I see it for what it is, and my eyes are awake because I really think that my salvation in Jesus Christ really opened up my eyes to all of it, because I worked for NPR, I went to Illinois State University, I even wanted to become a teacher, work in the public sector, I considered becoming a politician, all of that. And then I was saved by Jesus Christ, and then I realized, holy crap, I was groomed to become a little activist. And I was a band geek, or like a nerd, you would say. And it's so fascinating because had not my salvation happened, had not I sought Jesus Christ and cried out to Jesus Christ, I think that my life would look very, very different. And I think that I would have went into the public sector or even become a liberal and stayed in college forever and, marched in pro-abortion marches. I think that that could have been a real possibility, but thank God I had, devoted Christian parents who never stopped praying for me to come home. Definitely a prodigal at one point. Right. So I came back to faith, and I think that really changed the direction for my life. Unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily always happen. And I just think it's so fascinating. You see the cheerleaders and the football players, they grow up and they wind up being like, they get married, they have these big families, they work these blue collar jobs, they're the nurses and they're working in kind of like the private sector. And you grow up and you're like, man, they really were grooming me to be a little activist. So yeah, that's really what this is all about. It's about public sector versus private sector. And we're living in the revenge of the nerds. And I think that this story with Peanut and Fred, it just came down to, hey, that guy is popular. He's an entrepreneur. We don't like that. And we have to shut it down, and we have to exercise our authority as a government branch. All right. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Share this out with your friends. And I'll be back tomorrow. I was a band geek, theater geek. Yeah, me too. I'm not saying that you always wind up liberal if you're a band geek or a theater geek. It's just much more likely, I think. And because you grow up with this bitterness in your heart towards, the people who were popular. These are the people who, are exercising, and people who, take pride in their looks, people who eventually grow up, they marry each other, and then they have these big families, and they prioritize family, and then they prioritize their small business. And it's something that I think that it starts out in high school, and there's just this divide. And really, it's the fault of the teachers. They should be not dividing the children, but uniting the children. And I think that the teachers are complicit in that divisive culture in public schools, because they really want those kids to grow up to be little activists, to go fight for their pensions via lobbying or becoming a lawmaker and crafting it into law. Tier 1 pension systems, right? Or enhancing tier 2 pension systems. They're hoping that they can create little activists to go eventually secure more of their money at the state house. I really do believe that. All right. Bye-bye. I love you guys. We'll be back again tomorrow morning, bright and early, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m.